Audiences the world over love the Indiana Jones series because it is good fiction. People, however, wonder when it comes to the Bible if perhaps it also is fiction. Now, Indiana Jones lived as an archaeologist and worked in the world that produced evidences of history. That same world produces for us the real history of the Bible because it puts the Bible back in its accurate historical context. One of the gospel writers, John, wrote in his first epistle, "The things which we have heard with our ears and seen with our eyes, the things which we have beheld and our hands handled concerning the word of life." He explains quite clearly that all of the things that were part of the original Christian message were things that were in fact fact. Archaeology, as I said, brings us into the real world. And when we look at the real world, we understand that we have things in it that explain to us and clarify for us the world of the Bible. Here we have a jar from the 1st century AD, the very time of Jesus. Here is one from the time of Joshua, the time we call the Late Bronze period. Also, when you take an event like the Exodus, when the Israelites came through the Red Sea by the mighty hand of God, we have from the Egyptian account bricks made by the Israelites in the land of Goshen. Or we even have scarab seals, such as this one here, Amenhotep II, one of those who may be a candidate for the Pharaoh of the Exodus. From the time of Joshua, immediately after this, some think the story of the walls of Jericho falling down are fiction, but we can go to the stratum at that very period in which the Bible says Joshua conquered and find some of the mud bricks that made up that wall still in place today, or some of the ancient weapons that were used by Joshua, and also the Canaanites, such as this bronze sickle sword. So history puts the Bible back in an accurate historical context. Now, not everything that we have from the historical record, certainly in the Bible, has been discovered. Some say that absence of evidence is a problem. But in fact, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Go back 100 years and people read about the Hittites in the Bible. Mentioned over 30 times, they had not shown up anywhere in the historical record. But then they found in Bogazkoy, Troy, or in Turkey, the remains of this civilization. Some 15,000 clay tablets displayed all of their culture and all of their learning. King David, often thought to be a legendary figure, looms large in the pages of the Bible. Only in 1993 did they discover in the northern part of Israel, an excavation at Tel Dan, a stele, a stone monument erected by one of the enemies of Israel 150 years after the time of David, that read, "To the King of Israel of the house of David." If there was a house of David, there had to be a David to have a house. David brings us into the world of the Old Testament, and to understand how archaeology contributes to our knowledge of that particular part of the Bible, follow me. Near these high limestone caves at a place called Qumran have come jars. An ancient Jewish sect hid copies of scrolls, very much like this one here, the scroll of Isaiah. And every single book of the Old Testament, except for the book of Esther, was found among these scrolls. These scrolls now take our knowledge back to 300 years before the birth of Jesus, some 1,300 years before the oldest copy of the Bible previously. And now we know that these books of the Bible, the oldest that we have, comparing with our text, are almost 95% accurate. The small percentage is simply differences in spelling. So we know that the scribes who wrote these books very carefully transmitted the Hebrew text down through the ages so that they were almost without error. When we come to other events in the Old Testament, they say things like a miracle, which for many would not have any kind of historical attestation. We can find evidences of that in the archaeological record. For instance, in 3 books of the Old Testament, Kings and Chronicles and the book of Isaiah, we have the account of the Assyrian overlord Sennacherib invasion of Jerusalem. He had already sacked over 100,000 people and all the villages in the southern kingdom of Judah. And now he had Jerusalem in his sights. The Bible tells us that Hezekiah, the king of Judah, prayed. And it says a miracle happened. And the Assyrian overlord went back to his own country. There was assassinated in a coup. From the archaeological record, we have an account of Sennacherib's invasion of the cities of Judah. This cuneiform tablet, or prism, called the Taylor Prism after its discoverer, is actually a journal of Sennacherib's account of his invasion. And on it, he says that he has King Hezekiah of Judah shut up like a bird in a cage in his royal city of Jerusalem. The one thing he does not say is that he actually conquered Jerusalem. We also have historical texts which come to us in the Babylonian Chronicle, which also are silent about a conquest of Jerusalem. But it does tell us that Sennacherib went back to his own city and was assassinated in a coup staged by his sons when he went to worship his god Nisroch in his temple. So we have from the extra-biblical account the clear statements of history that this event happened. But why was Jerusalem spared? The only explanation we have, because history doesn't give it to us, is the biblical account that a miracle occurred. Now, when we come from the Old Testament, we move into the New Testament period. There we're going to look at some of the amazing discoveries related to the time of Jesus. The central figure in the New Testament is Jesus. Although the archaeological record gives us background concerning Jesus' birth and his life, it is the last days of Jesus' life that are most significant both archaeologically and spiritually. In Jesus' last days, we know that he went to an upper room where he met with his disciples to have what is called the Last Supper. Indiana Jones, in his film The Last Crusade, went searching for the Last Supper cup of Jesus called the Holy Grail. The archaeological record has given us that very type of cup. Here's an authentic cup from the time of Jesus from a factory in Hizma near Jerusalem. And it's made of clay and chalk and represents the very type of cup known as the Holy Grail. But this is fact, not fiction. Jesus' trials were both Roman and Jewish. In the Roman trial of Jesus, a man named Pontius Pilate presided over that trial. From the archaeological record, we have the very inscription that gives the name of Pontius Pilate, found at Caesarea. And in my hand, I'm holding a coin minted by Pontius Pilate. And on the back is the Roman year 17, the very year historians believe Jesus himself was crucified. So here we have the actual coin minted by the Roman governor who presided over the Roman trial of Jesus and condemned him to the cross. Jesus' own death on the cross was something that was remarkable. Historians tell us that they never have found evidence of crucifixion, and yet there were tens of thousands of people crucified. One of the reasons, of course, is those remains were used over and over again. But in Jerusalem, they did come up with one crucified victim. They found in an ossuary, a stone bone box used for burial, a heel bone pierced by a nail very much like this one. This is a 1st century Roman nail from the time of Jesus. But this nail had been driven through the heel bone of the crucified victim, hit the cross, and had been bent backwards because of a knot hole in the wood. And now, when they tried to remove it, they couldn't, so they had to take both the bone and the nail and pieces of the cross. So we now have an evidence showing exactly how Jesus would have been crucified. But in the record, there's a question as to why Jesus was crucified at all. After all, the Jewish method of punishment was stoning, and the Jews had the right to carry that out. Why did the Jewish authorities take Jesus to the Roman authorities for the sentence of crucifixion? And the archaeological record has answered that question. From the caves of Qumran came a scroll known as the Temple Scroll, the longest of the Dead Sea Scrolls, some 27 feet in length. And this scroll mentions that based on a passage of Deuteronomy, the sentence against a seditious act, an act of treason against the nation, can only be enacted by hanging on a tree. Now, the Jewish authorities believed that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, claimed to be the Messiah, was an act that the Romans would consider anarchy and would be something that would overthrow their nation. And so they said, if Jesus goes on this way, the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. So Jesus was a seditionist, and the only way to carry that out according to their law was hanging on a tree. And so they took him to the Romans to enact that sentence. Again, the archaeological record supports and sustains the very arguments the Bible itself makes. One of the last predictions Jesus made was concerning the destruction of the magnificent temple of Herod in Jerusalem. From coins like this one from the Bar Kokhba period, we have a picture of the facade of that temple in Jerusalem, a magnificent building. The rabbi said, who has not seen Herod's temple has not seen a beautiful building in all his life. And yet Jesus said to his disciples, you see these stones of the temple, not one of them will be left standing upon another that will not be thrown down. And he said, not only will they not be left standing, but the people of Israel will be thrown down within those stones. Here is an exact stone, an actual stone from Herod's temple that was found in excavations outside the Eastern Gate. And it is one of those stones that were thrown down by the Romans in AD 70 when they came against the Jewish people and destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. We also have in one of the excavations some of the remains of some of the Jewish people that were caught in that very particular conflict, coming from the Roman level of destruction, one of the victims, just as Jesus said. One of my professors at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem were looking at all the different reasons why the temple was destroyed. And they said, well, the Romans didn't really want to destroy the temple. They wanted to keep it so that they could give it back to the Jews once they submitted to their rule. But maybe there was some kind of an accident, but no one really had an explanation. Finally, our Orthodox Jewish professor was asked, what do you think? And he said, who knows? Maybe Jesus was right. Friends, Jesus was right because he was a prophet, but he was more than a prophet. He was also the Son of God. One of the last words of Jesus as he entered into the city of Jerusalem was he said, if these keep silent, the stones will cry out. You've seen the witness of the archaeological record, and we know that not one of these archaeological discoveries has ever contradicted a biblical fact. In fact, they have only complemented its witness. The archaeological record has shown us that the Bible can be trusted. If the Bible is a reliable archaeological witness, then the message of the Bible can be trusted. And the message of the Bible concerns Jesus. Will you trust him?